We'll wait for a couple of minutes so that others join who are interested, and then we will start it. So before starting up this session, let me just have a quick poll. Meanwhile, I'm joining in that how many of you are familiar with RMS and exchange? Suppose I ask that, have you tried exchange 2010? I'll get an option like yes, no. I've tried RMS and I have tried both. So it'll give me an idea whether how much you're familiar about Active Directory, rights management services, and exchange. All right. We're getting some votes that around 75-80% of the users have not tried the RMS Exchange 2010, and very few of them have tried RMS. That means no one has tried both. So we have very few users, or just a couple of them who are tried Exchange 2010. So what we will do, based upon that, I can have the flow of my session for this session today on Active Directory, rights management services, and Exchange 2010. We will wait for a couple of more minutes, and we will start with our session. Thank you. We are getting varying answers that very few of them have tried both of them. All right, let's start our session on this topic. And today's topic for the session is Windows Server 2008 R2, Active Directory, rights management services, and Exchange 2010 better together. So first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Aviraj Ajgekar. I am working with Microsoft India as a regional site manager. Here's my blog address, blogs.technet.com/Aviraj. In my day-to-day role, I am responsible for handling the IT infrastructure of Microsoft India's West region, and in that cases, we look after and we follow the best practices to keep our infrastructure up and running with the maximum uptime, maximum available uptime. And in today's session, we will talk about how can we use the Active Directory rights management services in Windows 2008 R2, and along with what's new in Exchange 2010 and how we can leverage them better. How can we use the information rights management for avoiding your information leakage in your organization, so you can deploy it in your small organization or enterprise organization depending upon how you want to apply. And then we will see some of the key features and the key demos that how can we deploy it very easily and use that rights management for avoid your information leakage. So that's a brief about myself. So let's talk about the information protection if you see that the information protection, we see that there are so many options by which you can either secure your network or your environment, you can integrate it, you can simplify it. So what it says, discover, protect, and manage confidential data throughout your business with a comprehensive solution integrated with computing platform and application. So this slide talks about the solution that we are actually released for you all, the business security, business ready solutions for security, wherein we are talking about secure messaging, secure infrastructure, and so many other options. The first in this you are seeing that is the protect anywhere, protect everywhere, and access anywhere. So in this, what we are talking about, that often you see that our employees are not in office always; they are on the move always. So often we see that people have laptops on which they are storing their corporate data, mails, and so many other information. Now the challenge in this case is that when you are actually moving out of office, your laptop is on the go. There needs to be some level of security through which you can protect your data efficiently. Now for that, in Windows Vista, Windows 7 on the client, and we already have something called as a BitLocker drive encryption. That can be helped to enable your data encrypted real time. Now, other than that, often you save your data on the PST format. Now, let's concentrate about the mail part. So let's say you're not using BitLocker, and there are other scenarios, or there are other options wherein you are just using your normal machine, and often you can access your mails from anywhere and any place. Not necessarily that you will always carry your BitLocker enabled encrypted laptop everywhere. Most of the times it happens that you are traveling somewhere without your laptop, you need to access your mails, and by the time you use something readily available like cyber cafes or a friend's computer or something like that to access your web-based mail. And in Exchange, you are already familiar about something called as Exchange Outlook Web Access, where you can access your mail real time by entering your corporate mail account information to the web mail. The next part is integrate and extend the security. So extend confidential communication to partners. Now this first part that talks about your security, your laptop security, and how you can share the confidential data between you and your peers within your org. Now the the second option talks about, that is integrate and extend security, is that when you have to do the same sort of security or the rights management or the protection, if you want to convey your messages securely to the person who's in different organization. So for that, what we can do, we need to have something federated that can be used for exchanging the data in between the two corporates. So for that, we generally use Active Directory Federation Services. Now, these Federation Services will help you connecting you from the different domains and different organizations. Lastly, we will talk about the simplify security, manage and compliance. So simplify deployment and ongoing management, and enable compliance with information policy. Now, while doing all these efforts, you will make sure that it's going to be easy for you. It can be deployed efficiently without much of the headache or much of the pain, so that you can leverage most out of it. Apart from that, it can be set up as a way that it should be following as per your compliance, so you can efficiently use the existing security tools, and you can use those rights protection policies configured for your clients. So let's move on with the topic, and let's talk about the Active Directory Rights Management Services. Now, in the Active Directory Rights Management Services, you will see some of the components that are visible over here on the screen. So if I just select a pointer, you will see that first one over here is my IIS servers, which basically the IIS role installed when on a domain controller you are enabling the Active Directory Rights Management Services role. Now this particular host AD RMS URL, this RMS URL is used for checking your certificates. So something like _WM, these certificates residing on your particular server, that can be checked real time whenever you are actually connecting. So you may have something like rms.contour.com/_WMCS-licensing. Then you have some licensing URL. Then you have the certification URL, or generally we call it the intranet cluster when we actually deploy AD RMS. It's rms.contour.com. So Contour is a domain in this example. You may use something like rms.microsoft.com/ underscore WMCA/certification/certification.asmx. Then you have this particular Active Directory domain services forest wherein the main authentication is taking place. Apart from that, you will see there are a few more roles which are configured through the server manager in the Active Directory. For example, you need to have the Active Directory RMS root cluster in order to deploy. Then you have the AD RMS cluster for licensing only option if you want to deploy internal licensing. Then you have the SQL Server for storing the configuration and the logging. All those options, all the logging, all the authentication information stored is there on the computer, on the main SQL Server. And then, so in case of if you're deploying a single Active Directory RMS solution, you may use a Windows Internal Database, which is a part of Windows Server, but this is only for the test environment. In the production environment, it is recommended that you should use the SQL environment. Then we have lastly the Active Directory RMS clients, so conversion of AD RMS. These are the clients which will be having the license or certificate, and then they will use the information for unlocking the protected mail. So I'm getting few questions over here. Let me just check something with the. Someone needs some participation code, so let me just take a look at it quickly. Meanwhile, I'll share the code for someone who are having challenges with connecting to it. I'll just continue with the agenda. So here is what the agenda we are going to talk about in today's session. Rights management protections, the danger and the solution for this. Configuring the rights management protection for Exchange 2010, how we can use our mailing. And using IRM with Outlook 2010 and Outlook web app. So let me just have a quick poll asking whether this agenda is okay as per our topic. Yes and no. So I'll get response from your end that whether are we covering the sufficient amount of information from the AD RMS and Exchange 2010. I am keeping the format simple. I am not making it complex, not adding any more subtopics. So I'm going to keep it relevant to the topic, so it will be easy for you to get the most out of it. So just those of you who are having some challenges or attending this conference, the participation passcode is the 4799302. So let the white tag. 4799302 is the participant passcode. If anyone are having any challenges connecting, please note it down. And with that, I'll just continue with my session. So thank you all. Almost 100% of the people have said that the agenda is okay. Now there won't be any sort of interruption. I'll continue with my session now. So this is the agenda, and let's just move on to the next part. So common protection today. Now, if you see the slide over here, you will see that you will often see such kind of mails from your internal corporate connections or the corporate people who are sending you the mail. Like one which says that Microsoft Confidential do not forward under any circumstances. 80% of the data leaks occur because of accidents, that is users being unaware of data policies as opposed to having malicious intent. Now, it is often happen that if you want to send something, many of the time you feel that you want to send some information to any of the users, or let's say one user, but by chance you add additional users, or by chance you forward a mail to the DL, and once you click on send, you have no control on that mail. It can be sent to 10 or 100 different people or to another DL. If you can have some sort of control on that mail wherein you don't want to give additional rights like do not forward, do not reply, or just reply to all, or just reply to me, or you can just set something like you can make sure that the message can be expired, that would be amazing, which we show the challenge initially. And you would have been seeing something like internal only and the confidential, do not forward and all. But this is not a solution. You have no control on the end user, wherein he may or may not forward this particular task or the mail. He may forward it, he may not forward it. Not 100% of the users are going to follow what you see. So here's some statistics, but users make mistake. Mostly the employee error. It's as per this particular graph that you are seeing. So information rights management features in Exchange 2010, what we have in the box. So first is monitor. Email for specific content, recipients and other attributes that includes the keywords, expression, sender, receiver, message type, which can be monitored with help of the Exchange transport rules that we will see in the demos. The control, the second option, the distribution with automated granular policies such as block, redirect, modify or encrypt. So depending upon your configuration, you can, or your setup in your organization, what sort of mails you want to allow, what sort of mails you want to block, you can set up the control. If you want to give permissions to the user to reply to the certain DS, if you want to just block it, you can do that real time with the help of this rights management policy. Protect is the third one. Protect access to the data wherever it travels using rights management. So encryption that travels with a message. Now, this is something that everybody wants. Let's take an example. I am working in Microsoft Office as of now. So internally, if I am accessing my mails, it's okay, I'm secure. If someone is sending me some mail, it's okay, I can see it on my laptop. But take an example, if I'm going outside, if I'm on a public domain, I don't have my machine with me, I don't have my corporate connection with me. If I want to use the Outlook web access or public mailing system wherein I want to access my corporate network, I will have to have some physical solution through which I can access my data, which is again a rights protected. Now, as of now, if you are familiar with the Active Directory Rights Management Services and the previous exchange, you were required to install the rights management add-in for a browser in order to access the rights protected data or the IRM protected mail. But with the release of Exchange 2010 and 2008 R2, you no longer require that. With the help of Exchange 2010 built-in RMS protection, you can just go to the browser directly, and with the new enhanced Outlook web app, or the OA we call it simply, you can access the rights protected mail directly without having to install any sort of additional rights management add-in for the browser. So that's one of the enhancements in this release. So you can open or access the mail in anywhere at any place. Next up is prevent. Violations of corporate policy and the best practices, non-compliance with government and industry regulations, loss of intellectual property and proprietary information, high-profile leaks, and damage to the corporate documents. Now, this particular feature helps you to achieve the following that we are seeing in the prevent. Now, often see that, let's take another example. Your company is a software company and if you're developing some source code, let's take an example for a certain module in a project. If you're executing or preparing some source code and if you're sharing the source code or some information of the source code to the internal employees, and assume that you are sending it, and in case you forget to apply some sort of protection to it, what it means. If it is a critical piece of information, that can be leaked easily. So, because you will not have a control, and that's not by purpose. Sometimes it is by purpose, sometimes it is accidental. So, people may not be wanting to forward that confidential information to outsiders, but in case if they want to share it with someone or with their managers, and if they're kind of forwarding it, in case they do not protect it, it's all available. But for such scenarios, for this type of accidental sending of the messages can be avoided by the help of the transport rules which are available in Exchange. So you can set a rule by which you can actually apply the rights management or the IRM on the IRM, that is the information rights management template, or the RMS template directly on the mail, even if you don't apply it manually. So this has been taken care by applying the rules like if my subject line contains XYZ word, or if my attachment contains something like confidential source code, authentication, risk, something like that. You can set up a rule, and every time if someone sends a mail without applying any protection, when you receive it on the other end, you will find it encrypted or IRM protected. So benefits of information rights management: granular protection that travels with the data. So every time you're trying to access your mail, as I told you that if I'm accessing my mails from the Outlook web access or from my public computer, and if I want to access my protected mail, I can do that real time with the help of the new Exchange and the new client. So what basically it does, every time you get any mail, it's a protected, depending upon how, if you're setting it IRM protected. Your end-to-end confidential information is still confidential. Nobody can access it. Only you have access to it. There are specific certificates related to every user through which they can only access the mail. So protect sensitive information no matter where it is sent. Prevents forwarding, modifying, printing, faxing, saving, or cutting, pasting. So Well, I just spoken to you about the forwarding part or the replying part or the do not forward part. There are other cases like you would want to print that information, you would want to copy that information or copy the text content of the images of that mail. But with help of the rights management, you can actually set up a way that you cannot take a printout, you cannot forward it to anyone, you cannot copy the content. So this all possible. You can disable cut paste, you cannot do save as. Everything is possible with the help of the built-in IRM. And as we have the granular controls, you can apply the IRM protection directly within a mail. So admins create custom message if you want to set up a template like confidential read only or something like that, depending upon how you want to do it. So we will see the demos in next 2 to 3 minutes. So before going on to how RMS works, first here is an example. First I have the information author, and then I have the recipient. Over here I have the Active Directory Active Directory installed on my server. I have the RMS server where I have installed the Active Directory rights management services, and then I have the SQL for storing my configuration and the login information. So firstly, the author receives the client license certificate the first time they write product information. So first time when I select any template, I get a certificate from my RMS server, which is a client license certificate specific to the user. The second option is the author defines set of usage rights and rules for their file. Application creates a publishing license and encrypts the file depending upon the rights that you want to perform. Then author distributes the file, that is, he sends the particular message. The recipient then clicks on the file to open the protected mail, and then the application called RMS server whether to validate which validates user and issues a user license. So depending upon whether that user is authenticated or eligible to read that particular mail, which has been cross-checked by real time with help of the Active Directory rights management server. And once the user gets a particular set of user license, the application renders a file and enforces the rights, and they can use the particular sensitive information. So with that, let me just have my first demonstration using Outlook without rights management, and then we will show how can we use the same with help of the rights management. So meanwhile, just give me a minute to continue with my demo. Let me just share my machine. So what I will do now, I will open up my demo environment. I'll just share my desktop so that you can show you the environment that I'm using. Alright. So here is I have resize it so that I can scale it up well. Again, this one. Yeah. So I have 2 machines over here on my Hyper-V box. If you can see, I have 2 servers running. One is my domain controller and one is my exchange. So on my domain controller, if I just guide you through the environment that I'm having, I have installed the Windows 2008 R2, and I have installed the Active Directory rights management role, which is over here. And in that rights management services role, I can see that I have configured the policy. Now, first thing if I want to do, I'll just go back to my exchange and let me just open up my mail. So what I will do, I'll go to HTTPS. Let me just maximize it. So this is the traditional way you send a mail by just accessing your web access, and then you just try to send a message. So generally, if you want to encrypt a standard message, you need to first create a template and you need to apply the particular rules onto it. So first I need to enable the IRM configuration. So well, I just started the server for the first server. It's taking a little bit of the time. Alright, meanwhile it gets loaded up, I can show the same demo on my actual machine. I'll just minimize it. So here is my deleted items. I'll go to new and just send a quick message to myself. Confidential information. The same way that you send a mail. And if I go to options, I can now select the permissions that I have. If I set no restrictions by default, test message, I'm just going to get the mail same. So that's just the first part, that we directly get a mail directly. And other than that, we don't have any other way for securing our message. So let me just that's my content. So in this example, we're just sending a standard mail without using any more protection. The next time we will see that how can we use exchange-oriented RMS points of protection. So there are things like you can use soft controls or the more harder controls. The dynamic signature for disclaimer, that's less restrictive, and if you talk about the more restrictive, we are going from left to right. We have the higher protection needs to be enabled. So Exchange and RMS deployment. So first, if you want to deploy Exchange Server 2010 along with the Active Directory RMS R2, it's part of R2. You need to have certain things in mind. First thing, you need to have your Active Directory RMS on a different server and Exchange variant on a different server. You cannot do domain controller, RMS, and Exchange on a single box. If you're doing that in a standard configuration, you need to have a dedicated server. You need to have a dedicated RMS server and an Exchange server. So Exchange identifies the RMS server using the SCP in AD. Then we have the Exchange calls directly to the RMS web service. And then we have the primary web services used by Exchange, include licensing and certification. So every time you try to access your particular secure certificate, it's going to call up and connect to the SCP, which is basically the service connection point, and every time it's going to connect to the service connection point, it uses that particular URL. That is what we just spoken to you about. And Exchange and RMS can also be deployed cross points or in a resource point topology. So if you have the complex or the infrastructure, domain infrastructure that you have deployed, you can make use of that. Exchange uses a shared identity for licensing in 2008 SP2 and Windows 2000 Server R2. So let's now continue with actual demo that includes the IRM configuration, configuring the templates and the general decryption rules. So let me just share my desktop again, and let me just load this. So what I will do now, first of all, I'll go to my domain controller and let me just explain quickly about what we have. So first time, on this server, I have installed the Active Directory Rights Management Services. So if I just click on my DC01 global server, which is my domain, you will see that I have the cluster name, which is DC01. I have the certification cluster type. Here is the URL that I was talking to you about, https rms.contest.com and http rms.contest.com /_WMCH certification and ASMX. Now, there are certain requirements if you want to link your Active Directory Rights Management Services and Exchange 2010. First of all you have to do is you have to configure your SCP, which is your service connection point, is an object created in AD by AD RMS. It provides clients the certification URL for this forest. So this is my service domain and this is my current SCP. So this is the first thing that you require. Second thing that you need to create is you need to go to this particular folder, which is your certification folder, and on this certification dot server certification dot a6 file, you need to give the permission to the Exchange servers group to read, execute, and read. This is required. So first thing you have to create is you have to create the SCP, which is a service connection point. You have to select as the first thing. So this URL can be this can be configured when you actually first time install the AD RMS. So when you actually install the AD RMS store, there are requirements. First thing, are you using the standard on a single machine on a test environment, or you are doing it on a production? If you are doing it on a single test environment, you can select Windows Internal Database. Otherwise, you need to provide the database instance running on a SQL in case you're doing it in a production environment or in a multiple servers configuration. So after doing that, by that time frame, you can select this particular URL that can be used for connecting to the client. Once you have done that, to actually synchronizing your Exchange 2010 to utilize the AD RMS templates, first you have to do, as I said again, you have to set up the SCP. Second thing you have to do is go to the particular folder wherein you have this certification URL, and you have to give the rights to this particular server certification.asmx file, and you have to click on add, and you have to add this particular group, which is the Exchange server group. Only Exchange servers can access that particular file directly. And the third thing that you have to do to enable complete rights protection is you have to go to super users, and you have to create a super user group. Now the members of the super user groups are granted owner user licenses when they request a use license from AD RMS cluster. This allows them to decrypt all AD RMS protected content published by the cluster. So these three things are required for synchronizing your Active Directory, rights management, and your Exchange environment. Now I have configured my Exchange. So I have configured my AD RMS. Now go back to our Exchange environment. So here is my Exchange environment, and I have this web access. Now you will see that first time if I have done that, I have to run this particular command. I have to use the set IRM configuration. Now before that, let's see the status of the IRM configuration. So I have now opened the Exchange management console dedicated for Exchange related commands. So this particular get IRM configuration command will check the status of the IRM rights management status, and it will give us the output what is the status of the particular IRM protection. So in this case, we need to have first the internal licensing enabled, which is true. So we can use that. So in order to enable that, we have to use the IRM internal licensing enabled $true. So this is the command that we need to require. Since I have already executed this command, I am getting this particular error. If I set up false, I can change it. So if I want to enable same for the internal licensing, I can do that. So now right now my IRM protection is now enabled. Now the first thing I'll do is I have to go to the website and try to log in and see if it really works. So first thing I'll do is I'll open my Outlook web app or my web-based Outlook that I can access from any computer. And what I will do, I will log in as a user called Holly, and with a password. So this is going to check. I'm going to log in, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to send one mail to another user in the same domain by assigning certain rights. Now, by default, if I just meanwhile it opens up, I'll just go back to my Active Directory environment, and you will see that in my RMS rights policy template, I have not created any of the policy templates, which is a custom template. On the other hand, if I try to open my mail over here, you will see that if I am sending a new mail to someone else at Microsoft, we already have. This is by default only. Do not forward is the by default created only template that you will find out of the box. These particular templates are manually created, like do not reply to all, Microsoft Confidential, Microsoft Confidential read only, Microsoft FT Confidential, and so on and so forth. So I have to create this particular template in Active Directory RMS over here by using the create distributed rights. So we will create that in next part. So here you will see that I have now logged on to the Outlook web app with the Holly Halt. And next one, I'm going to send a mail to another user with some rights protected information. So that in this example, in this demo, we're going to see how our rights management works. So this is I'm doing out of the box from the browser, and you're seeing that once I'm sending a mail to another recipient, I'm going to log in with that recipient's email address. I'm going to see if that particular recipient can access the data. So I'll be using and I'll send something as confidential share containing report, I'll say finance reports. So you can reports from the following share. I'll say control/reports regards. And what I will do, if you see over here in my web access, I have something called as a permission, and by default, I just have one option which is do not forward, because we just enable our rights management and we can just apply only that. So I have sent this particular mail to her. If you just see in a sent items, it's going to show us that what we just sent, and you can see that whether it's sent directly without any protection or with protection. Now, one of the examples that I did some time back, I just sent some source code module to that particular user without protection. So we are going to see that demo in some time. Meanwhile, let me see in my Exchange if I have created any transport rules, because if there are any transport rules, we can. Alright. Meanwhile, I will do one thing. I'll just sign out from this account again and log in with that person's alias to see if that user received the mail. Oops. Yeah. I'll say also. And the password is pass@word1, the default password that we use. And you will see that I have now received a mail, and I can open that mail directly out of the box just by seeing clicking onto the mail. So I don't have to do any extra effort for accessing this mail. I don't have to install any rights protection information. So let me just delete this particular mail meanwhile. That we just sent some time back. Now the next thing is, let us go back to our Active Directory RMS server and let's create some customizable templates. So what I will do now, to create a new template, I'll click on the Create Distributed Rights option. Then I'll say Add. I'm going to call it Do Not Forward. So Do Not Forward policy. Or that should be fine. I'll say next, and I can give that for anyone who is using this, apply to all, and rights to anyone is forward. So, or I can say create custom right. Already there. So let me just say that they can just view, they can just edit, but cannot forward. They can reply to all, and that's the rights that we are going to give. I'll say next, never expire, and finish. So I have created a new rule which says do not forward. So again, I'll go back to my original web access. In my web access, I'll click on new and see if I can see the new template. It's just log in, log off, and log in. See if it has replicated over here. No, I think we have already. I think I should have created something else because we already have this default name. So let me just create something else. So create default. I'll add something like you can read and write, read and reply. You can just read the mail and reply. So I'll say next. I'm going to add anyone into the group. I will say view, which is read, and just a reply option. I'll say next, next, and I will be using a browser add-in. We don't need to specify that. I'll say finish directly. Let me just refresh it once. So that should not create any problem. Let me just sign in and sign out and sign in again on the same machine. Right, login as so now let's try to see if we can see the new policy located over here. Okay. Since it's my exchange, it's not refreshed over here, I think. So just meanwhile, let's try to run the same. We have it is enabled. Let's see if it has now showing. Okay, it seems something fishy over here. Anyways, let me just continue with my next demo. So meanwhile, let's see if it is getting replicated on this particular machine. So the next step, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to create the new transport rule. For that, I'll click on the organization configuration, hub transport rule. And here what I will do, I'll say, let's create a new transport rule. And it will take some time to load. And in this transport rule, I'm going to say that if I want to send a mail, what details I want to add in. If I want to provide some information, like let's say confidential data, enable rule, I'll say next. I'm going to say that when the sender is sending, when the subject field on body matches the pattern, let's say when the subject field contains specific words such as confidential information, confidential, or risk, or revenue, something like that, I will say OK. I will say next. And if it sees that something like that in the body message, I will say that use the RMS templates. So it should be now scanning and refreshing all the available templates on my server. So we should be able to show my current template over here. Alright, so here is our newly created ready read and reply template over here, and I'm going to say OK, apply. Click on next, and I will say next. I won't be using any exceptions, so I'll say next and finish. So this is basically there is a power system at the back end saying that new exception, new transport rule with this particular parameter, confidential data, comments, and particular words that we have added over here. So once I'm done with this particular rule, what I'm going to do, I'm going to log in as a Holly again, that I'm already in. Let me just click on new to add the new rule or message. So I'm going to say to Nuno again, and I'm going to say that confidential information, we will be getting little low revenue this quarter. Let's just brief, and what we can do this way, we can use this permission directly from this option, or secondly, we can just send it to the Nuno directly. And when I send it to her directly, without actually doing any sort of rights management, encryption, or rights management rules, we need to see that in case that you are actually doing that in a way, the front person or the recipient should be able to get the mail in the appropriate format depending upon the transport rules that you have set up. now that you will see that, now I'm just logged in over here, and automatically you will see that the particular message has been read the mail and reply only. So I have only reply option. I don't have any option like reply to, reply all, and forward. So even if I send my mail directly without using any of the RMS template, it just got through, and I can just able to reply. I didn't have to apply any protection. So if at all, if you don't want to apply anything, by just the help of this transport rules, you can just create and apply the particular information real time. So that's another example. How can you create a real time transport rule for sending the same mail? So let me just try to send a mail, a reply to that particular mail. I'll say reply. And if I want, I can again select the option either do not forward or something like that on the top of it, on the top of the same mail, and I can send it to her right away. So that's one example. Now next we will see that how can we use the general decryption option if you want to give someone else access to the particular mailbox. So for that, let me just create a new mailbox over here. So in this demo, what we are going to see, we are going to create a new mailbox, and we are going to assign a user a right to we are giving that user the full rights to that mailbox. Then we create a general rule specifically to that user, and whenever that user will receive an email, a copy of it will be received by this particular general decryption mailbox user, that we are going to create now. So it is loading meanwhile. Why is it happening? I would like to take a few questions from your end. So just feel free to ask any questions meanwhile this is getting done. And then I'll be able to answer your questions. All right. Let's see if any questions we have. So how to disable the CC option when replying? So in that case, when you actually select this particular rule, like in this example, what we have done, we have just selected reply only rule, that is a read and reply. So if you just see over here, say reply, I can just reply to the user. So okay, I can set an option over there that that user can only reply to myself, and it cannot be added any other information. So you can configure the template on the server end where you can say that I don't want to provide an option wherein others can join in. So you have to manually create the template just like what I created, or you can just modify to create the template as per your requirements. So you can select the rights over here depending on how you want it. You can just set up a granular settings, or you can create your own template that what you want to do, just like that real time. So that's just the name I given. You can configure it later on as per your requirements. So let me just share my desktop again for the next part of the demo. I think I just missed to share my desktop. Yeah. So next what I will do, I'll go to my change box. And over here, I'll go to a new mailbox. So I'll say new mailbox, and for that I'm going to create just a normal user. Let's say a user mailbox, new user. Compliance. I'm going to say compliance, password is again the same. And I'll set up a default compliance as the same mail and I'll say next and finish. So this will create a new mailbox for this user. Let's see the complete list of mailbox over here. Alright, so I have now a mailbox, and I'll say that manage full access permission. So in this I can add a specific user to which I can give the complete rights or the complete control over this mailbox. So whenever I am getting any mail or if I'm getting any journal rules, I can set the rule directly real time. So I will add Mike as a user. I'll say manage and I'll say finish. So I have created a mailbox and I've added Mike over there. Now I'll go to hub transport role and I'll go to journal rules. I will say that I'm going to create a new journal rules, that is journal rules. All messages I'll say. So the journal message recipient, here I will select compliance security and I'll say new. Okay. So in that I'm going to say that send a journal report to the email. So I'll select the recipient as Nunu's report should be sent to the journal message for recipient. I'll say new. Alright, I think it's something is missing. Just one sec. Just give me a minute. I think it's yeah, okay. We share our desktop again. Yeah. Alright. So we have to create a rule by which we can see that when a mail receives to certain user, I can say that select the recipient from enter forest. So send the mail to our newly created compliance mailbox, and the following is the recipients to which if we send a mail we should be able to get it. So I'll say new, finish. So this creates a new rule. Now let's try to create login as Ollie and try to send a mail to user. So alright, let's try to send some information to Nuno without or with some management. So I'll say do not forward. Let's say it's secure mail or authentication. User name is demo, password is demo. So now when we send this mail, let's see if it works, and we should be able to get a mail to that particular mailbox, and then I can able to connect to it. So first I will do that. I will log in as a Mike because we have given him as the main user. I will log in as Okay, I'm logging here for the first time, so it is asking me this time frame. Okay, so we just now logged in. So what I will do, I will just right click and say open other users mailbox, appliance, see the default. And it's taking some time to load. So what we are actually doing, the by default, we will be getting that particular message to that particular mailbox that we just created. But since we have created a Mike as the person, we will be seeing that particular mail over here. So let's see if it works. Got it. And here you will see that I have this mail from this particular user because of my Outlook has sent me on behalf of Holly to know, and since I have created this particular general decryption rule, I can see this mail. So this is a secure mail for authentication that you can see. So you don't have the necessary user rights to see. And here is the actual mail which was sent to her, which is in a plain text format. So if you want to give rights, if you want to do some sort of control or the management, you can do that with the help of this particular option. So if you want, you have this, and when you set up a general decryption rule, you actually create the mailbox and assign a user as with the full rights, and then by result of this transport rule, you as a user will be able to see both the encrypted information, this mail, as well as the decrypted information directly in this plain text format. So that is a two rule that this is a way that you can create the general decryption. Well, let's go back to our presentation and continue with the remaining part. So meanwhile, before continue, let me just have a quick poll that if you enjoyed this RMS demo with Change 2010. And please feel free to ask any questions you have. It's been some challenges that I'm traveling outside the country, so it's been some challenges for me setting up the demos and setting up the machines and all real time. But still, I'm trying to do my level best to give you the complete demos. Thank you all. Almost 90% plus people have enjoyed this demo. That's great. So let's just move on with the next presentation part. So that's what we've seen. How can we create the rights, configure rights policy templates. Then we can create a configure transport rule. Then we can use the general decryption option for creating the rules for users to access, or if you want to give control to someone else. So there's something called as the mail tips in Outlook 2010. So if you enable the mail tips, you can actually set up the way through which you can actually provide information to users, whether they can have access to send it, they don't have access to send it. If I want to see the status of some users, if that user has set up a out of office, I can see that status real time with the help of the mail tips. So that can be very much helpful. That gives you an idea that whether you have right to send a message or not. So you can have something like protect sensitive data from accidental distribution. So it happens that you want to send something, but in case, let's say, if it's a huge DL, it's risky that you may send information to that particular DL. You may create a custom mail tip, or you can set up out of office that can be seen directly with the help of this particular mail tips option, and then you can set up a multiple alerts depending upon how you want to configure. So this is what the example that enable moderation, enable review and approval of emails before delivery. So you can set up a rule that forward a message to addresses for moderation, and once this is moderation, or once this is approved, then only you can forward this message based upon the settings. So that's one example. Next up is how to apply the IRM automatically. So that's the example that we've seen some time back. We can set up the rights protector message RMS template. We have seen this demo some time back. So depending upon the conditions you're setting up, you can use that RMS template to set up a rule. The next step is provide users with more IRM protection option. IRM protection can be applied manually, or users can be granted option to turn off the rule for non-sensitive email depending upon. So not always you have to send a mail. You have to provide information with the protection. Another is you can also use the protected voicemails. Now before going to that part, let me just show you one example of what the mail looks like in your Windows 2000, in your Outlook 2010 environment. So on my mail, if I'm let's say trying to send a mail to my manager, since we are traveling outside India for a decade, I can see that traveling to Colombo until 11th February. This is an example. So this is the mail that I have automatically received because this is out of office reply that I got. Same if I'm trying to send a mail to say some DL, which is a huge distribution group. So we can see that this DL contains so many recipients. So if you just see over here, you can see that option that remove contact group option because this is a DL. And let's say if I'm using something that where I don't have rights, you will get a message that you don't have permissions to send a mail to particular group. So these are the mail tips which will help you give you some insights before you accidentally send mail to someone else without the prior knowledge, or in case you lose that particular grip and send it across. Many times it happens that you wanted to send something else, but you just click on send button and then you realize that you should have sent that particular mail. So that's another example of how mail tips can be improved in this kind of scenarios. So next up, if we're talking about the protected voicemail, we have a prevent forwarding of voicemail option enabled in AD RMS and Exchange Unified Messaging. Permissions are designated by sender as or by administrative policy depending upon how we can set it up. So IRM search can be possible in this release of Exchange 2010. You can search in between the IRM protected mails which are rights protected. And you can even do the multi-mailbox search, include the option to search your IRM protected mails real time. So it's not just in your inbox. You can do this searching in the multi-mailbox depending upon how many mailboxes that you have or you have access to those boxes. The next up is IRM in Outlook Web Access and Outlook Web App. This we just seen in some time. So let's just see that how we are deploying in our environment at Microsoft. That how can we use the Outlook Web Access with IRM. So it's relatively useful when you are actually out of office and you are actually accessing the data from different locations. It's always a challenge that you need to have the full experience in your organization, and just like how you set up a mail in your org. And when you go outside, you don't want to miss that functionality that how can you perform certain tasks and how can you use those roles. Often it happens that when you actually move to some other, if you go out of your office and if you don't have a corporate laptop, you don't have that proper information. On the machine you have Outlook client or something like that to access a mail. But if you go out there, it's a bit of a difficult. So what we generally do, we can use the Outlook Web Access to access the mail real time on your computer. So let me share my desktop and to show you how can we use the Outlook Web Access. And the best part is that you will get the similar experience on your computer as on your browser, just like how you would have got on your Outlook client. And you can apply the same set of rules directly onto that particular mail, or you can read those mail directly. So what I will do, I'll just share my desktop again to show you how I can use my Outlook Web Access or Outlook Web App to. So if you just see that, I have now opened up my Outlook Web App. I have my presence, I have my communicator. I can just click on New, and here I can select an option to whether I can send a mail with the particular RMS template. So if I just go to my Firefox client, you will see that I'm actually getting the similar set of experience over here. It's all same. I'm not finding anything difficult. I have the same filter option, enhance options. Everything is similar. If I click on the new, I'm real-time getting the option to do the same operations from Firefox as well. So it's not just browser dependable. If I want to send a mail to someone else, I can just send a mail real-time. So who is online and depending upon what. So I can just double-click and chat real-time. So that is not stopping me from doing my work wherever I am working from, either from office or I'm out of office. So I am on my mails always with full security. I can even access those particular mails which I receive, which are live protected. So that's the best part of this particular web access technology. You can actually receive or get all your mails directly on a browser. You can read them. You can even send them without having to wait for any sort of your laptop or the corporate client. So that we just seen, send receive messages using OA. Well, so what we've seen in today's session, we've seen how Exchange can automatically classify protect sensitive email attachments. We have seen the transfer protection rules, Outlook protection rules, which can be helped to create the RMS templates as per your requirement and how you can efficiently deploy it in your org. Secondly, Exchange 29 RMS will work in your existing compliance tools and IT infrastructure. So you can use your transport decryption option, general decryption, and search real time. Even if you're in a browser, in a web access, and if you want to search within your rights protected mail, IRM protected mail, you can do that real time. Lastly, we have seen that Exchange 29 makes RMS easier to use for end-to-end users across OS platforms, regardless of where they are. So native IRM in OA support client experience in mobile and Outlook. You can have the same experience on your mobile phone. If you're having a Windows mobile, you can access your IRM protected mail on the mobile phones. You can read those mails directly. You can reply them. You can even access your protected voicemails real time in a browser. It could be Firefox, Safari, Internet Explorer, anything. You can see that real time. So that is all from my end. Thank you very much once again for joining in. I will be here for next 10 minutes for the question answer, and then we can end it. Feel free to fire up your questions now. So some questions that I'm getting. So feel free to send your questions. I'll just answer. Before going on, feel free to provide a feedback, whether it's good, bad, or worse. I'll just set up a quick poll to see, did you enjoy the session? I will have a quick poll before we will close within 10-15 minutes. Well, thank you very much for the response. I'm getting few questions, so I'll just answer a few questions. All right, let's start with few questions over here. In 2010, chat is built in with Exchange server or it's a built-in? No, it's not built in. You need to enable that. So at our environment, we have actually deployed Exchange, as well as we have option of Office Communication Server. With the Exchange, you get unified messaging out of the box. But if you want to have the complete OCS Outlook client, you need to install Outlook Office Communication Server for complete Outlook chat experience. One more question. Is information rights management is a part of Exchange 2010? Well, no. Exchange 2010 is a separate suite. It's not, IRM is not part of Exchange 2010. Let me just share my desktop again to show you that how can we do it. So IRM, or basically when we talk about the Exchange 2010, it's a part of your Active Directory Rights Management Services, Windows 2008 R2. So if I share my domain controller, just share my domain controller over here, you will see that if I go to my server manager, I can select, let me just, it's launching, so meanwhile I'll take a few more questions. So if I go to roles, I have option to select add roles, just loading, and if you see that it's one of my roles that I've installed, so I click on add roles, I can select next, I can select I need to install Active Directory Rights Management Services, I'll select next, 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 and I can configure. Right now I have already configured it, so I can click on ADRMS and it will give me all the information related to that particular role. So Active Directory Rights Management Services is part of Windows Server 2008 R2 out of the box. The only thing that you have to do is once you have installed Exchange onto it, you need to make a configuration. You need to make them sync. So to sync, I told you the three ways. You have to go to your RMS console, go to Properties, select the SCP that you configure during your ADRMS configuration. Secondly, go to the certificate. In the ADRMS certificate, the certification. In the properties, you can select Exchange servers, give them full rights. And once that, you have to create a super users that will give complete grant and complete access to all the users. So if I just go to my role, you will see that if I just scroll down, I can select add role services. So I have option to select either rights management, which I've already installed. I can also select the identity federation support. So that leverages the federation trust relationship between your organization and other organization to establish user identities and provide access to proprietary information created by the either organization. So let's say I'm having this domain, control.com. If I have some other domain, let's say woodbrewbank.com or let's say abc.com, and if I want to set up the trust relationship between those two domains, or which could be the two different forests, I will be using then the identity federation support. So if I have not configured the AD with SSL, it will not work. You need to have the SSL as a mandatory. So just for an example, like it's a part of Windows 2008 R2. It's not a part of an exchange. It seems there are no more questions. I am here for 5 minutes more. If you have, just feel free to fire up the questions.
Please pardon the interruption. Your conference contains less than 3 participants at this time. If you would like to continue, press *1 now, or the conference will be terminated.